The full State of Society report is too long for us to present to you in the time we have today. So we have chosen to focus on ways we see Spirit opening in new directions or highlighting growing edges. We quote extensively from the meeting's reports. 71% of meetings responded, including 6 prison worship groups. Challenges of the pandemic. In a year beginning and ending in pandemic, familiar ways of celebrating community ceased, were changed, or felt muted. Having given much in previous phases of the pandemic, friends sometimes felt that they were being asked for more than they had left. A meeting observed that in 2020, there was a degree of honesty, revealed vulnerability, and intimacy in some settings that felt full of possibility. That receded in 2021 as we re-armored to persevere, as we figured out how to re-engage, and as we experimented with how to maintain our connections and deepen engagement in our worship. For some meetings, the challenges of the pandemic led to deeper spiritual connection. They were able to find hope and meaning in the midst of struggle. The yearning to meet together continued. Nuts and bolts. The art of pivoting has become important to embrace through the pandemic, through the process of closing down, reopening, changing mask requirements, etc. Most meetings noted changes in how they held meetings for worship. One meeting wrote, "Some friends do not like meeting by Zoom, but using it is much better than not meeting at all." Other meetings voiced concerns for friends who stopped attending as worship formats changed during the pandemic. Reflecting on their experience of the COVID-19 pandemic, a meeting shared, "It's been hard. It is stretching us. And while we have been stretched, we have not broken. We are finding strength and resilience as we face the peculiar challenges that the pandemic has offered us. We rely on each other more and treasure the community we have. In being stretched, we are larger than we were before, and we embrace the changes we have had to live into." Incarcerated Friends. The ministry from prison worship groups and preparative meetings speak powerfully of the impact of the pandemic's second year on incarcerated friends. The continuing specter of COVID-19 has hung over New York State prisons and jails. Men have lost loved ones to the pandemic, and family visits have been restricted. Outside volunteers have been unable to enter facilities, and so some worship groups have not been able to meet. A prison worship group lifted up the poignancy of the men being thanked by the government for making coffins during the pandemic. The Inside Outside Letter Writing Collective provided joyful opportunities through correspondence for mutual accompaniment between friends in the yearly meeting on both sides of the walls. Outside Friends reflected on writing petitions and letters for clemency, seeking parole release for the aged and for those at risk due to COVID-19, and helping released friends in their re-entry. These efforts were particularly important at a time when outside volunteers were unable to be in contact with friends inside. For incarcerated friends, freedom is a vision for our futures. Children and family. As the pandemic continued into its second year, many meetings again expressed concern over lost connections with families and children. This was not universal, however, as some meetings' connections to families grew throughout the year. One meeting used a family-centered approach in which families started out meeting informally at the beginning of the pandemic. They adapted to circumstances as they arose, meeting when families were able, and involved everyone in figuring out when to meet and what projects to complete. Meetings were creative in their responses to declining or absent first day school programs. One meeting had a presentation on welcoming families and youth, in which the presenter stated that rebuilding a youth program may take as long as 5 or 6 years. Grief, loss, and trauma. One prison preparative meeting spoke to the condition of many meetings when it wrote, "We are all experiencing trauma created from the new normal that has resulted from COVID. While the unique traumas experienced by inside friends are quite different from the experience of outside friends, there is a commonality in the disruption of life routines. Outside Friends noted and grieved the loss of day-to-day community building activities, including potlucks and discussions. One meeting, speaking of the toll of the pandemic, reflected that even as the COVID-19 pandemic has taken much from our vitality, we are still together, unquote. Aging. Many meetings spoke to the reality of their aging community. ARCH, Aging Resources Consultation and Help, pivoted, moving trainings online to meet the ongoing needs of the yearly meeting community. One meeting continued a unique project, Faith Journeys of Our Elders, creating 3 video interviews of elder friends' spiritual journeys. Time does not permit us to share video clips today. Links to the videos are in the full report and will be shared in the daily Queue Up emails this week. Deceased friends. Over 20 friends were named by meetings in their reports as having passed away in the last year. Meetings also noted the deaths of others in their community without naming them. There will be a meeting for remembrance Thursday afternoon for us to remember and grieve our losses. Opportunities and joys. Both inside and outside meetings noted that this pandemic year provided an opportunity for some friends to move at a slower pace, providing some with more time for study and reflection. Individual friends shared that their personal spiritual practices, such as meditation and inspirational reading, blossomed with the more unscheduled time brought about by pandemic restrictions. New ways of being meeting. Several meetings expressed a sense of opportunity, of possibility in being gathered together in new ways, both structural and spiritual. One meeting wrote, as we move toward coming back together in person, basic questions that are asked when people undertake a new beginning seem fresh and important. Who are we? What do we believe? What does it mean to be in community? How do we treat one another? What is it we are called to do? Other meetings experienced transitions in their physical meeting spaces. Reflecting that the property is not who they are, several meetings united around the sale of beloved meeting houses and felt released from the burden of maintaining a building. One meeting wrote, we continue processing the how and implications of letting go of our monthly meeting status. We are blessed to have the members and attenders who have kept us functioning throughout the pandemic and appreciate the sense of being enlightened in coming to an awareness that we are ready to continue in the religious society of friends, but as a worship group. Another meeting reported struggling. In our limited capacity, we continue searching for the truth, centering down and focusing on the inner light. Caring for community. Meetings reported on little and big ways they were caring for one another. One meeting wrote, our meetings stumbled on a few separate occasions this year, with attenders and members experiencing insensitivity and harm on issues related to race, gender, and ethnicity. Ministry and Council saw this as an opportunity to renew our commitment to allyship, to do our best to promote a culture of inclusion through positive and conscious efforts, sensitive to the diverse life experiences of all members and attenders. Ministry and Council has articulated a commitment to addressing harm because we understand the negative impact that insensitivity and microaggressions can have. We hold the care of the entire meeting in mind when we listen to and believe the experiences of people and when we challenge insensitivity and address harms. We recognize a range and lack of privileges among friends and embrace our responsibility to use our privileges to lift each other up. Addressing differences and harms within our communities. Meetings expressed a need to deepen their sense of community. One meeting spoke of the ways in which the continuing political divisiveness in the broader society seeped into our meeting community. Another reported moving forward lovingly with agreed upon COVID-19 protocols while experiencing differences about how to implement them. Often, differences exacerbated pre-existing conflicts within meetings. One meeting noted that the challenges presented by our differences have demanded that we dig deep into our understanding of Quaker practice to find ways to accept and respect each other's opinions and to hold each other in the light. The clerk of another meeting experiencing conflict called the body to search their hearts for their role in the harm that has been done, acknowledge the conflicts, and commit themselves to worship, love, and deep listening to do the work of healing. The clerk asked, "Are we ready for this brave conversation?" Witness. In 2021, a significant witness initiative took place in response to restrictions on the Greenhaven Prison Preparative Meeting. New York Yearly Meeting, 9 Partners Quarterly Meeting, several monthly meetings, and individual friends petitioned the United States Supreme Court to review rulings in their litigation against the New York Department of Corrections and Community Supervision to restore Greenhaven Prison Preparative Meetings, regular business meetings, and annual gatherings with outside friends from across the quarter held at Greenhaven Correctional Facility. Social action. Many meetings in one way or another spoke of how social action often begins with the involvement of individual members that then draw in the meeting. A meeting wrote, "We were concerned about the turmoil in our broader society with the assault on democracy, climate change, and issues around racism. We found support in our faith community. The wider Quaker community has been a place to share, listen, and take action. While we did not take action together as a meeting, we are each grounded in our faith in how we move forward to face these challenges. We recognize that each member conscientiously works towards a better society by living our faith in our daily interactions." One meeting rematriated the land behind its meeting house. The meeting acknowledges and honors their Indigenous neighbors' presence and history with a spoken acknowledgement of at the opening of business meeting and with a sign over the entry which states, "This meeting house sits on the ancestral lands of the Oneida peoples of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy." Anti-racism. Friends engaged in anti-racism work in a multitude of ways, beginning with self-reflection. A meeting reported on its internal work to address racism, encouraging committees to work towards further inclusivity, diversity, and building a beloved community. The meeting went on to say, "We continue to labor for shared understanding and shared action around the issue of race. We range in our awareness of the ways our community unfairly burdens or does not welcome people of color. Some friends were pained by a lack of a widespread sense of responsibility to challenge racism. The gulf in understanding is sometimes a source of friction in our meeting. We continue to endeavor towards unity on this aspect of the Quaker testimony of equality." Some meetings posed questions and queries about how to proceed in doing anti-racism work. One meeting asked themselves, "Whose ministry is this, individuals or the full meetings? What does anti-racism work look like? Are there right and wrong ways to do it? How does this work call us to action together and separately?" Another meeting asked itself what the term anti-racism really means, lifting up the queries, does holding AVP workshops for racially mixed groups count as anti-racism work? Does being part of a racially mixed family count as anti-racism? Does interacting with people of color on the basis of who they are as individuals, including their experiences of racism, count? Does being aware that a person of color may see things differently from me, and for good reason, count as anti-racism? Does anti-racism work mean lobbying for laws that will, we hope, chip away at structural racism? These meetings' queries reflect the importance of our individual and collective work around anti-racism. Some meetings reported on their engagement with the yearly meeting's draft statement on becoming an anti-racist faith community. One meeting reflected that although individuals are involved in anti-racism activities in the greater community, the meeting as a whole has not yet integrated this witness into the spiritual life of the meeting. Another meeting minuted its support for the draft statement. Some meetings lifted up a concern about the importance of using loving inclusiveness for discernment around racism. Other meetings have yet to consider the draft statement. Overall, meetings continue to educate ourselves about the meaning and work of anti-racism, to continue what it will mean for us to become an anti-racist meeting, and to explore what we must do to achieve that. Facilities. A meeting reported how COVID-19 impacted their meeting house. It is a little eerie to arrive at the meeting house and find the parking lot covered in grass, with signs of deer making themselves at home in the weedy gardens. It almost felt as though the vacant, dark building invited nature to come closer for company. The meeting house seemed to act out this neglect by flooding its basement for the first time and allowing its heating system to falter with corrosion. The Wi-Fi router even stopped sharing information. Like the boy who cried wolf, the repeated false fire alarms continued to call the fire department to come visit at random hours. The entire building now looks older, in need of repair and paint. One wonders if our remote hearts to God will show up with hands to work. Many meetings spoke of working on their facilities during periods when the meeting houses were closed, working on a new roof, new pavement, dampness remediation, furnace replacement, thermostat updates, and converting heat systems to renewable energy sources. Some meetings received New York Yearly Meeting financial support for this work. Suggestions for New York Yearly Meeting support. These are some of the suggestions Friends offered to the yearly meeting. Offering monthly meeting programs to the whole yearly meeting. Opening opportunities for participation for Friends with limited financial resources. Help with advancement efforts. Reaching out to smaller monthly meetings. Help and advice with virtual and hybrid technologies. Thoughts and queries. As a committee, we read and reread all the submitted reports. The meeting's reports reflected such a diversity that we were unable to describe a condition of the yearly meeting without flattening the experiences of people or meetings. We deeply carry the concerns raised by the reports in our hearts. We encourage Friends to read the full State of Society report. Going forward, let us all hold space together, waiting for Spirit to lead us into next steps and into the new. What ministry rises for Friends?